Well, what a year 2022 has been in politics, both here and overseas. Joining me live to discuss everything from Anthony Albanese moving into the Lodge to the chaos in British Parliament. From Bondi Partners, former Minister in the Howard government, Peter McGauran. Happy New Year.
Well, it is a happy new year because we're seeing the end of 2022, Tim.
It's been quite a year, hasn't it? Extraordinary in politics. Let's start in Australia because a massive change with Anthony Albanese coming to power.
Very much so. It wasn't totally unexpected because the Morrison government and Prime Minister Morrison himself were in trouble long before polling date. But the two big surprises to me, at least, have been the rise of the Teals federally. We're not sure that they can replicate it on a state level. In fact, they didn't. Spectacularly so in Victoria. And secondly, what's happened since the election date where Prime Minister Albanese and his government have consolidated their hold on power. They've gone up so that their primary voters even reached 40%. So his performance since election day, where some people thought he was the accidental Prime Minister, has been quite outstanding on any measurement.
He's been underestimated, hasn't he, Peter, by many because he's always been a precise politician.
Yes, you're right, Tim. He's been underestimated. But don't forget, he is a centre-left politician. We've seen that from his industrial relations laws that favour the unions very strongly, his intervention in the marketplace on energy pricing, and there's a long way on that yet to play out. But nonetheless, he is walking that fine line between catering to his base, which the Liberals often forget to do, as well as not frightening the horses, being measured, being common sense, and not seeking to be anything other than the plain man in the Lodge.
In contrast, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison and his reputation in tatters after what happened with, him appointing himself in various ministries and everything that's happened since.
Yeah, there's been a pile-on, and the good things he did as Prime Minister, remember there was a period there through 2019 and the first few months of COVID in 2020 where he was as popular, if not more so, than the current Prime Minister. But in the end, he blew it. He became shrill, he became divisive, and he became all-consuming. So I'm afraid he wrote his own political epitaph. But I'm sad that his achievements in office, at least now, are being overshadowed by his obvious mistakes, such as taking on 5 secret ministries.
Before we look back and see the fact that Daniel Andrews has come into power or retained power in Victoria, just looking ahead just slightly, what do you think about Dominic Perrottet's chances of retaining power in New South Wales? And look, it would be one of the last bastions of the coalition.
I don't rate his chances as high, but I don't write him off. Now, I'm not trying to have a bet each way, Tim, although it sure sounds like it. He's in there with a chance. He himself personally is well regarded in New South Wales. Every poll reveals that nobody's wanting to get rid of him as an individual, in contrast to Morrison. But they've been there 11 years. There's been disunity within their ranks as a political machine. The Liberal Party in New South Wales is inefficient. Factional warlords are ruling. There's a lot against him. He may yet pull a rabbit out of the hat, and Labor knows it. And structurally, the Liberals have a 9-seat lead in New South Wales, and by a considerable gap. So Labor's not taking this as a given. They are fighting to the very last day. So it'll be a fascinating election to watch. He'd be worth a good bet, Perrottet, if you like good odds, but you're sure going to get good odds.
Well, you and I both like good odds. We both like, punt with our head not over it, obviously. But what about in Victoria? Because Dan Andrews, after all the criticism throughout the COVID pandemic, he sort of waltzed it back in, didn't he?
Yeah, and to everyone's surprise, Even Labor, Tim, and I was talking to a lot of them before the election, they never expected to win 55 seats, which is basically what they held going into the election. They would have been happy with a bare majority of 46 seats that have taken that happily, or even minority government with independents. So it was a resounding victory. And he's such a polarising, divisive figure, and I think that's why political commentators and observers such as myself were beguiled into thinking he was in real trouble, because you either hate him or you love him, and there are a lot of haters about Daniel Andrews. So there are some warning signs for the Labor Party and for Daniel Andrews in the political makeup of Victoria. They lost a lot of support in the West and the Northwest in their traditional seats, a lot, but held the middle class and, of course, the inner seats that were traditionally Liberal. So the political landscape in Victoria has been completely altered, and it's hard to predict where we go from here, other than the Labor Party is very secure for the next 4 years.
I want to ask you about two things before I let you go. Overseas, in the UK, we've had turmoil in the British Parliament. We've seen the death of the Queen. What happens in 2023?
The UK economically, Tim, as you well know, is in deep trouble. It does seem to be a declining world power. The national health system, for instance, is creaking and is in real trouble. So they are, and with very high inflation, energy issues which dwarf our own. So it's hard to be optimistic about the UK, although they're such a resilient and innovative people, you can never write off the UK. Look, it depends if you're a half glass or half full sort of person. If you're a glass half full, you'll say, well, the democratic institutions in the UK worked, that the Conservative Party got rid of a completely hapless, incompetent Prime Minister in record time. If you're a half empty sort of person, you'll say that they're beset by incompetence and confusion. I'm relatively optimistic about the UK, politically and economically, but they've got a long road to hoe.
We've seen that Donald Trump and his wife paid little or no tax. Is this the end of him? Is this the end of him to finish with?
Yes, but he is still capable of wreaking hell on the Republicans, because he has his base and they are the pre-selectors in many seats. What the Republicans overwhelmingly want, or certainly need, is common sense, balance and inclusiveness, and Donald Trump doesn't represent any of that.
Well, looking back home, and of course you are the chairman of the Australian Turf Club, and we have Racing Dreams here on Sky News. I'm heading up to the Magic Millions in a couple of weeks to do some reporting for us up there with Katie and Jerry and the gang, and we expect another huge year in 2023.
It's a golden era for thoroughbred breeding and racing, Tim. The crowds are back, at times in record numbers, and post-COVID, outdoor sports have a patchy record at the moment, bit up and down for a lot of sports, but in racing, thankfully, people are coming back to enjoy the animal and the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy New Year, Pete. We'll chat again in 2023.